So everybody, welcome to The Grid is our new classroom, and your house is the school hallway. And I kind of got this idea as I started to join classes in the last couple weeks. And I've been talking to kids and saying, when there's a noisy hallway at school, we shut the door and we try and eliminate the noise. But when there is a noise, when there are noises in the background or things going on in the background of the grid, then the teacher can't shut the door. So it's really a group effort to make the grid the most successful classroom as possible. It's hard to believe that we are 8 weeks, we're ending our 8 week of remote learning at Summit, and we have about 4 weeks to go, and we're still learning new things every single day. And we try and incorporate them and work them into our plan as best we can. And it's not easy. And again, I was humbled as I started entering classrooms and grids with teachers and students, and overwhelmed by the job for the teacher to keep kids engaged, the job for the children to stay engaged, and the job for the parents to set up the environment that facilitates that engagement. And on top of all that, move forward in learning. So it's a big job for everybody. Okay, thanks, Jess. All right, so the grid is our classroom and your house is the hallway. We're learning lots of new things every day and trying to incorporate it. And it's a challenge, but I think everyone's doing a great job. So in putting this together, the first thing that we wanted to acknowledge is just the limitations that we all have. There can be limited space for setting up your kids and your workstations. The internet connection, as we talked about earlier this morning, the internet connection in your house can really determine where you have to set your child up or where you have to set yourself up. And then there is competition for space in the house and resources. We know of kids that have had some disagreements right in the grid with their siblings as to who gets to use the computer. So not enough computers, laptops, Chromebooks, not enough desks, not enough table space. So as you listen to this, please know that that's in our thought bubbles, and we are keeping that in mind. Certainly our dream is the bottom picture with the nice quiet setup, but for many the reality is going to be several kids at the same table. So we were going to talk about a couple different things that we can do to facilitate success, and that is headphones and microphones, being aware of what the status is, looking at the cameras, the chat box, even the seating of the child, and clothing, what distractions are going on, and participation. So to begin with headphones and microphones, what I have found is that there's an assumption that when your child has their headphones on, everything is quiet for the grid. And people tend to forget that everybody in the grid can hear everything in your house, even though your child has the headphones on. You can't hear the grid, so we lose sight of the fact that the child is in the grid participating in class. So we hear feedback. In my sessions, I hear a lot of feedback with parents giving other children in the house feedback about the work they're doing or how well they're participating. We hear the conversations with spouses about whose turn it is to make dinner. We hear business meetings, dishwashers being unpacked, vacuums, smoke alarms tested, and lots of phone calls into doctor's appointments and calls in for prescription refills, and all that information gets shared in the class and becomes, as disappointing as it might be to the teacher, that becomes way more interesting than what the teacher is trying to do on the grid. So that's one of the things to keep in mind. If you picture your child seated with their headphones on, and you are nearby in a work call with your headphones on, again, we feel like we're in our own little world because our headphones are on. You can't hear your child, but your child can't hear you, but the students on the grid can hear you and your colleagues, and your colleagues can hear the grid. And you may think, of course, Eileen, but I don't think we think of that. And last week I was in the living room while my daughter was on her math class, her high school math class, and I got the math lesson, but I also got her husband's business meeting with his NASA consultants, and could hear his frustration with them when they weren't doing the formulas correctly. So it was great that all the girls in the class saw that math matters later on in the working world, but it wasn't great that that conversation was a part of the math class. And being who I am and doing what I do, I wrote a very gentle email to the head of academics, and she wrote a very gracious email back. I didn't name any teachers. I didn't give a lot of specifics, just asked that they go over it. And my daughter mentioned that yesterday in math class, she heard more meeting and more frustration. So again, it's just something to keep in mind that when you're blocked out in your world, the people around you are still getting what's coming off your computer. So microphones are typically, the teachers would like the microphones off. And here's why.
Good morning, I'm David Green. You may have heard that the U.S. Supreme Court is live streaming oral arguments this week. Well, yesterday the following sound was also live streamed.
When the subject matter of the call ranges to the topic, then the call.
That's right, the highest court in the land was treated to a toilet flush. The lawyer presenting his case didn't seem to notice, but maybe this is a good opportunity to remind everyone to mute yourself on those conference calls.
So I think it's really funny that we're covering a topic that is being discussed in the news today because the Supreme Court had the toilet flush yesterday. And we certainly acknowledge that our Google Class meets are not Supreme Court level conversations. Those kinds of things can really distract our kids. So that's the main reason we need mics off, is that everything that's happening in your house becomes a part of the grid. Also, there's an echo and feedback. If mics are on, then the teacher can get a lot of feedback, making it harder. And then after sitting in on some classes, I've also seen it's just so hard for the teachers to continue to stop the lessons and ask for the mics to go off. And it turns the teachers into kind of a nagging mode, which they just don't want. And then the parents are in the background hearing, you know, Johnny, turn your mic off, Susie, turn your mic off. And so I think if we could just try and help establish a mic off policy as we go through these last 4 weeks, and then mics on when the teacher asks questions, that would be super helpful. Cameras. When your student has their camera on, everyone in the grid is able to see everything going on in the view of the camera. And I've had the most well-intentioned parents who have set the kid up, the mic is off, the child's at the desk, but the parent is in the background painting or getting a do-it-yourself project done, or unloading the dishwasher, or vacuuming. Just conversations in the background, siblings, pets wandering in and out. So again, just like with the microphone, with the camera, what's going on in your home becomes much more interesting to the students than the group plan that the teacher is running on the grid. So we ask the cameras be on, but then we ask that you be careful about what's in the background of the camera. Cameras on allow the teachers to get thumbs up or thumbs down. So when the mics are off, I've been in a lot of classrooms where the teachers, ask a question and ask for a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And when the students don't have their cameras on, they're not able to participate in that way. the camera on also allows the teacher to get some feedback as to whether or not the child is participating. As I talked to a few of you in the beginning of this, and we know it's just awkward to be talking into your camera or your computer and having a lot of black squares with initials on them and not getting any of the visual feedback from the kids. 93% of our communication is nonverbal, which is pretty amazing. So when a class has their cameras off, or many in the class have their cameras off, the teacher is really robbed of the experience of keeping them, knowing if they're engaged, and also getting feedback from them. And the other students lose out on that connection with their classmates. If the camera's on, the teacher is able to redirect the students back into the group when they have noticed that the student is wandering off either physically or their brain's kind of rolled out, they're attending to something else. Cameras off are a real monkey see, monkey do. I've sat in some classrooms, one kid turns his camera off and then 3 more go off. It's a little bit like being in a classroom and the first kid that raises his hand and says, "May I please have a glass of water?" Or "May I go out for water," or "Go out for the bathroom?" And then the domino effect, more kids have to go to the bathroom. So we do appreciate all of the cameras on to prevent all of the cameras from going off. And as I mentioned earlier, just talking to faces is so much easier and more comforting for the kids and the teachers. The chat box on the Google Meet is great for asking questions. What we're asking is that kids keep them on topic because it's just a distraction to the class. I've been in a classroom where kids are announcing, new events in the house, new events for the family, new pets, what their plans are. And then when they didn't get a response, then lots of emojis come through. So again, that behavior in the classroom can be seen by a child acting silly or doing something to move the teacher away from the content. But in the grid, that behavior happens in the chat box. So we ask that you give your children some feedback if they're using that chat box in a way that's going to be distracting. And again, the teacher wants to limit the times that they have to interrupt the class to correct behavior. The next thing I just wanted to go over is seating. What we sometimes see is the cameras are on, but I think you can see me, my head going in and out of the camera, or the child who is walking around the house to find a better spot, and we get a tour of the house and a little seasick along the way. Also, the students who walk away from the camera, I think, leave a lot of their classmates or grid mates wondering, where did she go? What's she doing? Gosh, I wonder if I can leave. Are they going to come back? And once that child's brain has gone to those thoughts, then their brain has rolled out of the group and they're no longer able to focus on whatever it is the teacher is teaching. So the camera on the move and the body out of the group. The camera on the lap is another way we see lots of movement. And again, the wobbling camera makes it really tough for the rest of the kids and the teacher in the grid. So what we hope to see is the students seated at a desk or a table. The computer is stationary. And when kids can't be at a desk or a table, if they're in a bigger chair in a room or in a beanbag, good seating support. So if they're on the side of the bed, there's pillows around them to kind of limit the space in which they move so that they can stay in the camera more easily. The child seated in the center of the camera is great. We do have some kids that are uncomfortable with that. And, we respect that, the kids who don't want to be on the camera. For some of the kids, if they take themselves off the grid and they're not as distracted by their own picture, and that's how they've been able to handle that. So what you wear and where you sit really does matter. We want the kids to be comfortable, but not so comfortable that they're falling asleep. And it might be surprising to hear, but we've had to wake kids up. We've had kids who don't turn the Google Meet off because they've fallen asleep, either in their beds or a beanbag. So that's something, again, we respect that space is limited, but that's something that we really appreciate. If you're in your room, that they not be in the bed and certainly not under the covers. And if they need to be on the bed, that they be on the bed in a way that they're not so comfortable that sleep and complete relaxation is going to happen. As far as clothing, we are certainly not asking uniforms be worn, although I do know some schools that have turned to that because they feel like it's changing the atmosphere. But we discourage pajamas just because of the whole, I'm in my pajamas, I have a different mindset. And it doesn't set the kids up for the same level of concentration for some kids. For some kids and some teachers, it's not a problem at all. But just touching base and seeing if that's impacting your child. So distractions in the grid. I'm working with some kids individually who share a lot, and they'll talk to me about getting texts during class from a classmate. They'll talk about kids who are on their phones clearly playing games, kids who are eating, kids who are playing with pets. So that makes it clear to the teacher that that child's brain has rolled out of the group. So setting the kids up with phones necessarily not with them during class, with meals and snacks done before or after class. We've had kids who have had problems with the food falling into the Chromebook, and that becomes a big issue. So those are distractions that may not seem like a lot, but are definitely impacting the kids' ability to participate in the class. And we want to try and help the students understand that participating in the class really goes well beyond just showing up and being in front of the camera. It's, I love this slide that Jess put it so clearly. 1, 2, 3. Here's what we're looking for: cameras on, mics off, chat boxes for topic questions only, teachers seeing eyes on the grid, head nods and shakes, thumbs up and down. Those behaviors really show the teacher who's engaged and who he or she needs to prompt and support a little bit. Thinking with your eyes is the kids looking at the grid and gaining information from the facial expressions on the teacher and the facial expressions on their classmates. So we really can get a lot. We impact the grid a lot. We impact our classmates on the grid and our teachers, and we really can get a lot of feedback from the grid when we're looking at our classmates and teachers. So as I spoke to teachers and I asked them, if you had the parent's ear, what would you talk to them about? A couple teachers wrote back, coming to class prepared. And students who are engaged and have the materials, the teachers are very consistently seeing those kids are enjoying class more and they are getting more out of class. So that's the teacher's plea. And again, we respect that you might have several kids that you're printing materials for. You may have run out of ink, the printer's on the blink. There's so much involved, and we respect that. But when possible, having materials laid out perhaps the night before or in the morning will allow that child to stay engaged, keeping their brains in the group and becoming a part of the learning process so that we're moving learning forward during this remote learning period. We're not just keeping them where they are, we're advancing their knowledge in different areas. So class preparation or being prepared is really essential to that process. And we appreciate all that you can do to facilitate that. And we know it can be work. So it's hard for some of our students to think of the grid as a place where we share space with others because we're not in the same room. Despite that, as I mentioned, our behaviors do impact others on the grid. And we have a pretty strong social thinking and social emotional learning curriculum at Summit. Our teachers, our psychologists, our support staff are involved. And even in person, it's hard for everybody to think about others. So taking this all and doing it remotely is even more challenging. So what we really want to do is facilitate that understanding that we're all on this grid together and we're all impacting each other. And I think we impact each other, and teachers think we impact each other in such positive ways just by showing up, turning the camera on, turning the mic off, and being a part of the grid. The kids and the teachers get a lot of emotional support from seeing each other. So we want to set up a positive and effective learning environment. And that's going to involve decreasing our distractions and just making it easier for teachers and students to be in the grid, body in the grid, brain in the group plan. This week, I talked to a couple of my kids that I work with individually about what I was doing. And one of the students said to me, I'm losing skills in my awareness of others because I'm not around them. And this student is a very socially aware student. So I was shocked to hear her feel this way. So she's feeling disconnected. Another student was saying, I don't feel like the teachers can help me because they're not with me. Other kids are feeling frustrated or disappointed that they can't be with their friends. So what we want to do in these 4 remaining weeks is really, in the future of whatever grid learning is, we really want to help the kids support each other and feel supported in the grid space that they're sharing, and helping them realize that even though you're not in the same room, you are sharing space and you are impacting others and they're impacting you.